Right, so hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, Hair System DIY. I have Scott here. Scott has been kind enough to do another video with me. I made a complete mess up last time, and I forgot. Well, the record button didn't work on my phone, so we're doing it through my laptop this time, and it definitely will work this time because this is what I've always used in the past, and it's always worked. So, Scott, thank you very, very much for being willing to jump on to a call with me again. Scott wears a full cap wig. He's been through, he's experienced hair loss himself, and he's been through sort of hair systems, hair transplants, and now wears a full cap wig. So I'm really excited to speak with him. Scott, if you wouldn't mind sort of giving us a bit of a background, when your hair loss started and what sort of interventions you sort of tried early doors.
Yes, my hair was fine until about age 25. Then I
Mhm.
started losing it really quickly. So by the time I was 28, 30, I had hardly anything left on top. So the first thing I had in Harley Street was a double hair transplant because of how much had been lost. And they did an FUT and an FUE the next day. The FUT is the older technique where they cut the big strip. It leaves a big scar and it's much more painful. But if you've lost a lot, like I had, the older trick, the older technique actually gets more hair, and that's why they still use it, even if you've got the spare money for the newer one. But even with the double hair transplant, the result was not too good. So in that time, I also experimented with laser cap therapy that was popular at the time, and also PRP shots, and finasteride as well. But they all did nothing. It's just trying to stop the ocean with grains of sand. So a few years after that, I had the first hair system done at a salon, full poly, full glue, lasted for 3 weeks before needing changing again. That looked the most real because they did it. But then a couple of years after that, lockdown happened, so the salons were closed. So I learned to do my own, started buying them online, got a full lace with a full tape perimeter. That was better for handling the heat because the full glue ones were just too uncomfortable, especially for training. So I just did a full lace perimeter, even the front, which was fine because I always wore the hair down. I never exposed the hairline. But then very recently, because as comfortable as the full lace is, I don't like training in it because of the heat, and I don't like sleeping in it. So I just tried with the full wig because I could just take it off at any time, and that seems to fit me better.
Right. And regarding the sort of the earlier hair transplants, and you mentioned finasteride and laser and that kind of thing, because I used those interventions as well, and I kind of had a very similar experience to you in that number one, it certainly doesn't give you the desired look that you're hoping for, number one.
Yeah,
And also, well, actually, three things. Number two, they're very expensive hair transplants, and the medications and the laser. I seem to remember being very, very extortionate. I went to one in a clinic in London, and it was thousands for 6 months worth of laser. It was thousands, 3,000, 4,000 pounds, and this is about 10 years ago. Um,
I ac- I actually bought the laser cap. I've still got it, and then you
right.
can wear it yourself at home. But
Hmm.
besides being a funny light for a home party, it doesn't really do anything.
Mm. Yeah, just seems like a bit of a gimmick, to be honest. And I certainly found that when I was on the laser and the finasteride and even saw palmetto, I just found that I was still receding at pretty much the same rate as I'd been receding prior to the medication.
One
Did
of
you
the
find the same?
suppo yeah, yeah, one of the supposed benefits benefits of the laser is that it increases circulation. But I do a lot of gymnastics training with a lot of handstands, and that increases a lot more circulation than a laser ever would. And if
Mhm.
increased circulation was the magic cure to not losing your hair, I would not have lost any hair because of all the handstands I do. But
Yeah.
I still went almost bald. So
Mm.
increased circulation to protect your hair
Mm.
is just a rubbish theory.
Yeah. And also, I think because we both started experiencing hair loss at a similar age, I think certainly when you're a young man in your 20s and early 30s and you're losing your hair, it really does come to challenge, your identity and your idea of who you are as a person, especially if you're in those young years and you might be on the dating scene, you might be trying to find a partner and that kind of thing. And you'll be willing to do anything, even if it's not backed by scientific research or anything like that. If you see something that someone or a couple of people might have found helpful, you'll be like, yes, I'll do it because the cost doesn't matter. I just want to keep what I've got on my head.
Yes, it's like the people who are chasing either weight loss or muscle gain. They get to a
Mhm.
point where they are so desperate you can get them to take anything,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, million percent, million percent. So you mentioned that you had the earlier the FUT hair transplant, and then
Yes,
after that you had the FUE. Did you find that the hair that was transplanted fell out, or was it just too thin?
it was too thin, but in my case, the donor hair wasn't that good anyway. It had diffused, and they really shouldn't have treated it.
Mhm.
Apparently, it diffused so bad, one guy actually looked at it. He wasn't a surgeon, but he was someone who's examined people who's had hair systems, and he said that's not supposed to happen to your hair on the back and sides until you reach age 70.
Blimey.
So that's just a bad case of hair.
Yeah, yeah. Probably genetics to an extent as well. I suppose if you've got, parents or grandparents who've experienced hair loss, they're genetically more prone to being follically challenged. And I suppose,
Well,
us as their, youngers that end up inheriting that.
well, I had one granddad who was very short,
Mhm.
and he never lost his hair, even aged 66. He'd not lost a single hair, but he was very short. My other granddad lost all of his hair, and he was a very big guy, and I got the worst genetics of both.
Very short and lost all your hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite similar to me actually. I'm like 5'7". I had one granddad who was 6'3", and the other one who was 5'4". And even though I'm taller than the short one, it's not by much. But he kept all of his hair, and the other one went bald when he was about 21 or something. So
Yeah.
very, very similar boat. So did you have to take medication as well alongside the transplant, like finasteride or anything like that?
During the recovery, they had me on biotin
Right.
supplements.
Yep.
They're often sold as promoting
Great
your hair
supplement.
follicles.
Mm.
It doesn't really do that much under normal circumstances, but apparently, straight after a transplant, you have to give those new moved hairs every chance of surviving. So that's why the supplement's given for that. And to be fair, that bit worked. What they did worked. It's just that I was expecting more, but it was sort of like the best of a bad job. I can't criticize what they did. That was just the best they could do.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people ask the question regarding hair transplants. They say, how much is it? Obviously, for you, it wasn't worth the money because it didn't work. But I think a lot of people who are trying to decide between a hair system or a full cap wig and a hair transplant, they say, well, maybe over a lifetime, the hair transplant works out cheaper. However, it's my understanding that it's a big upfront cost. And as you're saying, quite often it doesn't work. You don't have the right sort of donor hair for it to work.
Yes. Also, the permanent damage, as it were. I I actually had a good surgeon, there doesn't seem to be any permanent scarring showing, even when I shave all my hair. But at the very least, what you will have is if you have a transplant that puts more hair at the front and middle, but then you continue to lose what was already there, instead of reaching age 45 and being bald, you'll have like a very strange peach fuzz
Hmm.
where there's just bits of hair. That's what I've got. So I either have to cover it all or routinely shave it all. If I just let it grow, you sort of look like something's wrong with you.
Hmm.
Because instead of having hair or being bald, you've got hair that's so thin
Yeah.
it it you sort of seem ill to other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the side effect.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the short-term side effects are worse. If you have an FUT done, they literally imagine your head is a tin of beans and what the surgeon uses is a giant can opener. That's what they do to the back of your head. I've got a video if you ever want to see that. It's proper gruesome. Because the scar is so big and
Yeah.
takes about 3 weeks to heal, you can't sleep in a bed for three
Wow.
weeks. You have to sleep in a seating position because it hurts your head to lie down,
Yeah.
and that takes about 3 weeks.
Blimey.
So
Blimey.
that's that. The
Yeah.
other thing that they don't tell you is, well, they tell you wear a cap for a week so that you don't scare anyone with the red patching
Mhm.
that you get from the surgery. That bit's true, but what they also don't tell you is, as part of the surgery, they inject you with a lot of anesthetic. Now, anesthetic, apparently you can't sweat it out. So what happens is your face starts to bulge out. And I've got this on video as well if you want to see it. Your face starts to bulge out in places, which lasts for about a couple of days until you pass it in your urine as fluorescent yellow.
Blimey.
But when they say wear a cap for the first week, no, take a week off and for the first 3 days wear a mask or stay at home because you will scare someone if they see you.
Yeah, yeah. See, this is so important that you're sharing this information because this is never advertised on, hair transplant clinics. They never say anything about this. They never talk about the aftercare. They never talk about recovery, and they never talk about potential side effects of whatever they give you in terms of anesthetic or anything like that. And this is why it's so important that people watching this are aware. If you're thinking of having a hair transplant, it comes with risks. It really does. And as Scott is saying, and he's testament to this because he's had two transplants, it's not a walk in the park and it's not a guaranteed result. So I'd like to say thank you for sharing that. So let's move on to the next stage of, your hair restoration journey. You said you moved after that to hair systems.
Yes,
So did you go to a clinic first off, and how did it all begin in that respect?
went to a top-end barber's in Manchester. Um, I think he's still going. If I recall the name. No, I don't. But apparently, it's one of the best in Manchester. And as a side service, they do hair systems as well as normal haircuts. Very, very expensive.
Mm.
And you're right on the previous videos you've done, they do charge a lot. But
Clean them
I
out.
just wanted to see what the best outcome would look like. And then I can play with it after, because if I have it done, Rosman, that was the hairdressers in
Okay.
Manchester, Rosman, David Rosman,
Mhm.
and apparently he has some VIPs go to him. Um, I thought I'd let them do it first, because if they do it and I think it still looks not good enough, it's not worth trying it myself. because I'm
Mhm.
never going to do it as good as they do it. So I paid a fortune, I let them do it, and it looked really good. And I'd have carried on doing that because I've got a lot of spare money. I'd have just carried on going to the salon all the time, but lockdown happened. So I got to try the full lace with the tape, and that was just a lot more breathable for training and sleeping.
Nice. And then, so once you sort of got past the clinic phase, did you start sort of trying to do it yourself and ordering online and that kind of thing?
Yeah, made a real mess of it to start with. I got
We
wrong,
all did. We all did.
yeah, the wrong color, the wrong hair
Yeah.
length. It just got a bit silly. I eventually, through trial and error, did it. But once I got the right system, applying tape, made a mess of it. It took about an hour and a half to do the first one.
Mhm.
And when I last did it, I got it down to 15 minutes.
That's pretty impressive. Even I can't do it in
Yeah,
15 minutes. I think the first time I got my first system, it took me 4 hours to do a maintenance because you're kind of learning on the job and you can watch all of the YouTube tutorials that you want, but there's nothing quite like actually doing it yourself. Watching it is completely different to actually doing it yourself. And I was so relieved that I got a robust first hair
yeah.
system. So I got like it was a lace in the middle and like a poly, like a medium thickness poly around the edges. Because I think when you're new to hair systems, you can't be going with an ultra thin skin or a Swiss lace because they're so delicate. The chances are you'll probably tear it if you're trying to put, take tape off of it or something like that. It's so much wiser to start with a much more forgiving unit where you can make mistakes and get away with it.
The part of it that worried me the most was after you've put all the tape on it and everything and it's ready, actually putting it on and then getting it in the wrong position or whatever. Had it not been for one particular product, I never would have bothered. And that was the positioning spray
Oh yeah.
by Walkers.
Yep.
So just before you fit it, you spray all the tape. I think it works with glue as well, but I
Hmm.
only ever did it with tape. You spray all the tape and then you put it on, and then you've got probably about 10 seconds or so to adjust it in the right position and then let it set
Hmm.
and then press it down. There's some people that say that if you do that, it reduces the lifespan, but I only
I've heard that
ever
before.
went as I only ever went as long as a week anyway,
Hmm.
because you're not supposed to go longer than that, otherwise it makes the tape sticky or dirty or something. So I just did it for a week
Hmm.
and
And
with the spray.
with the spray, yeah. And when you first started wearing systems, I know that you mentioned it was during lockdown, so I suppose you wouldn't have been seeing as many people as you would, in normal life. But when you encountered people who you knew, be it friends or work colleagues or whatever, what were their first impressions when you turned up with
But
this full head of hair?
by the time it was lockdown, everyone had already seen me before when I
Right.
was going to the salon before lockdown. So some people did that thing where they look at you and they sort of do a double take. But it's a bit like school. It's if you do something odd to your appearance at school, I don't know, you get sent to school in shorts or something, or you've got a funny haircut. For the first couple of minutes, people might be saying things to you, but then after that, it's like you're not worth their attention. They just go back to what they're doing.
Mm. Yeah.
It's yeah,
And it's really interesting actually. So many people will put comments under my videos and they'll be like, how do I deal with other people when I've got a hair system? How do I deal with, the surprise and the questions and all of that kind of thing? Similarly to you, I had a very similar reaction from people in my life. I remember there was a guy who was my flatmate at the time, and I came back after getting my first system. And he just looked at me and was like, have you had a haircut? And I was like, yeah. And that
yeah.
was it. That was literally it. And just like we just carried on with a normal conversation. And I think people hair system or people who are on the fence about hair systems, they can get stuck in their head a little bit, and they can be so worried about what other people's thoughts and opinions might be. But in reality, we as human beings are much more concerned about what's going on in our own head and what's going on in our own lives compared to what's going on in other people's lives. And, I think when
Yes.
people realize that, they're like, you know what, it's actually people actually won't even notice that much. Well, they may not even notice at all.
And that was before social media took off like it is now. And now
Mm,
you're competing for people's attention even more now. So it's
absolutely.
the point that I might see you for a system in the first time and I sort of do a double take.
Mhm.
And then 2 seconds later,
Yeah,
that
the video.
just
Yeah,
looking at my phone, you're gone.
yeah.
You don't exist in my world anymore.
No, it's
You
true. It's
almost have
true.
to do something extremely radical to yourself in order to get attention from me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then that won't last long.
Mm. You'll be
The other
distracted
thing
by
I've
something
found,
else.
yeah, the other thing I've found that most hair system wearers tend to do is they tend to worry too much about the realism of
Mm,
the hair, where it
mm.
doesn't matter at all because there was a lady who used to work at the place I used to work at, used to come in with this like lovely red, purple hair thing. And people's first reaction was like, yeah, that looks good. It wasn't like, oh, well, that's not real.
Mm,
We're because of the color, that's not real. So
mm,
we're taking points off for that. It's just, yeah, that suits you.
mm,
So even if it doesn't look real, it
hmm.
doesn't matter. And in my case, especially, even if it doesn't look real, it still looks a lot better than if I wasn't wearing it
Yeah,
because I'd
yeah,
just be bold with like dotty surgical scars all
yeah,
over.
yeah. I completely agree. And I think naturally, I think us people who wear systems or full cap wigs, I think we're naturally more on the perfectionism side of the scale. And I think that it can become a problem when we become so perfectionistic that we have to have the most perfect looking hairline. Because at the end of the day, the reason most people get hair systems or full cap wigs or hair transplants is to basically get our confidence back and get our self-esteem back so we can feel
Yeah.
like ourselves again. That's going to be completely undermined if we're constantly looking in the mirror, one worrying about how our hairline looks. We're going to be
If the
exactly back at square one. All of those anxiety traits, all of those perfectionism patterns are going to be coming to the fore again. And it's undermining everything we've done to get our hair back, you know?
if they start doing competitions, fair enough. If they do like a human version of Crufts,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
then maybe there'd be something in it. But until
Right.
that happens, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
The only
absolutely.
disadvantage with these wake units, yes, you can take them off any time, but
Hmm.
you can't go in saunas with them because they don't
Right.
like the heat. And you also can't go swimming in them, but you're
Hmm.
not really supposed to do that in the proper air systems because you'll just
Hmm.
rip the colour out of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the main advantages are you can take them off, put them
Hmm.
on whenever you want, so you can have a good scratch or wash or whatever. But also, the colour doesn't fade in the sun.
Hmm.
So it's about, say, 450, 500 for a unit, and it should last 6 months.
Hmm.
You have to have separate wig specific shampoo and conditioner for it. You can't use anything from before, but the
Right.
colour won't fade. And I have that colour that's sort of, in between blonde and brown.
Hmm.
That colour range that's notorious where if you've got a real system, you really do have to stay out of the sun.
Yeah.
Otherwise, within 4 weeks, you've got a brass coloured
Yeah.
unit.
Yeah. So, tell me about how the full cap wig fits, because it doesn't use tape or glue, does it?
You can. It's lace, lace at the front, lace at the middle, bits of lace where the silicone isn't. So there's silicone on the back mainly,
Hmm.
so you pull it down, and then there's silicone bits at the side, so it pulls down there.
Hmm.
Now that and that alone, the wind won't blow it off. That's enough for normal use. If I wanted to do some light gymnastics and it stay on, I would probably get some tape out like I would with, you know, a normal air system and just, put a bit of tape on to keep it in.
Right. And in terms of, you mentioned earlier that you don't tend to sleep in it. So can you tell me a bit
No.
more about that?
It's just the comfort of it. I got, as suggested by others, I got the silk pillowcase, but it didn't, for me, make any difference. So I
Mhm.
just able to take it off now and then. That's that.
Right. And in terms of shaving the hair, your natural hair that grows through, how often do you have to do that before it gets itchy under the wig?
You can get away with it for at least 3 weeks.
Wow.
You
That is
really
way
don't.
longer than I thought. I thought you'd have to be doing it every couple of days.
No, no, I
Wow.
do it once a week at
Mhm.
most. And I only do that so that if I take it off and I go to the gym and I
Hmm.
take my cap off, I at least look bold rather than that weird peach fuzz that I was explaining
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that and I was just naturally bald anyway, or it grew even, you could leave it 2 or 3 weeks and it's fine. You're not constantly shaving.
Right. So it sounds to me like the maintenance is much easier than a hair system because you're not having to deal with tape or glue all of the time. You don't have to sleep in it either, so you can put it to the side. And especially in this heat, it's been such a hot summer, especially down the southeast of the UK. At night time, it's been very hot, and I can imagine not having the wig on your head is actually quite refreshing at night.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It, like I said, it does look slightly less real than a normal hair system. Hair systems would cover most scenarios. I think
Mhm.
this isn't me trying to persuade people who are happy with hair systems to transition over to wigs. If what you've got fits your scenario, fine. But if you do fall into that group of people where if it's good enough, but slightly less realistic than a hair system,
Mhm.
but you can't stand training in it or sleeping in it and the hot weather and the maintenance, that use case is worth considering.
Sure. And just lastly as well, what would you say to someone who has maybe struggled with wearing hair system, they've struggled with the maintenance or the comfort, they don't like sleeping in it, and they sort of feel a little bit hopeless, I suppose, because they're like, well, if this doesn't work for me, then nothing will. What would you say to someone who's, feels a bit stuck and hair systems haven't worked for them?
I'd say try wig,
Yep.
definitely.
Yep.
Definitely, they have different sorts, different lengths, different hair colors, and
Hmm.
this one's just a base unit that I then stuck on. I reckon I could make it look slightly more real if I did a few trips around it with thinning scissors to just make it less dense, but I've not touched it. But that doesn't mean that someone else who got one and then thought it's too thick, they could do that.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Okay.
definitely try it.
Sure. And yeah, I did actually have one last question. When you order a wig, do you have it pre-cut? Do you cut it yourself, or do you see a stylist?
It was they're done to certain hairstyles.
Hmm.
It's difficult to change like the parting unless you apply heat, but
Sure.
then some of them can't take heat. So it's best to, from the beginning, pick the one you want to be the style and the length and the color,
Sure.
rather than taking one and then modifying it unless you really, really know what you're doing. But
Sure.
they've got plenty of different sorts, so you should be able to find what you're looking for. If not, then if you do like to play with it after you've got it, then I suppose a hair system is better.
Sure. sure. Well, look, Scott, thanks so much for coming on again, coming onto this call. I know that a lot of people are going to find this super helpful because at the end of the day, hair systems aren't for everyone. Hair transplants aren't for everyone. And I think the more options are available, the better it is for hair loss sufferers. And there'll be a lot of people who just don't get on with the hair systems, and full cap wigs could be the perfect solution for them. So I really appreciate you coming onto this call, and I know that a lot of people will find this video super helpful. Um, and anyone watching right now, thank you for tuning in. And I hope you found Scott's story really helpful and insightful. And yeah, we'll speak to you very soon.